Hello, dear viewers. Welcome to Wild Werewolf. Are you ready to embark on a wild and thrilling journey into the world of werewolves? Here, we'll explore the untamed nature, the raw power, and the captivating stories of these mythical creatures. So, get comfortable and let's unleash the wildness together. Werewolf Forest, Chapter 25. The library was small, but it was packed with shelf after shelf of books. Some were old and worn, their binding beginning to fray. Their titles were inscribed in golden or black calligraphy into the cloth-like covers. They were in foreign languages, making the writing on the spine seem all the more enchanting. Some were even in odd pictographs that I couldn't begin to make out. Other books were newer, in their shiny plastic covers, and far less interesting to me. I was stuck there with Connor as he did his work for the pack. Andrew had revoked his vouch, but Connor had stepped in and given his own. I hadn't seen Andrew since, except for the passing glance in the house. Though even then, the pass was so brief that I was unsure I had seen him at all. Maggie, I looked over to Connor. He held a stack of papers in his hands, ready to be reviewed and debated by the council. I need to take these downstairs. You can sit with Cease if you'd like. I might be a while. I nodded and followed him to the infirmary. As I sat down next to Cease's bed, Connor whispered something to the nurse. She looked at me, hesitation and worry in her eyes. No doubt, she feared I would escape and the blame would be put on her. She eyed me curiously as Connor left. I met her gaze and she looked away quickly, embarrassed at being caught staring. Hey, Maddie. My eyes snapped back to Cease. Her eyes were half open, one still purple and swollen slightly. The cuts were almost gone now, small, fading pink lines in their place. She looked tired and weak, as if the life had been sucked out of her. How are you feeling? I sat on a stool and grasped her cold hand in mine. It was so small and fragile, like the hand of a china doll. Delicate, cold porcelain. I'm all right, she whispered. A little sore here and there, but I'll live. I heard about the council's decision. Cease looked at me sympathetically. Yeah. Looks like I'll be singing Jailhouse Rock for at least a little while longer. She choked on a laugh and dry. Throaty coughs began to rack her small frame. I helped her sit up and gave her the glass of water that was sitting on the bedside table. Are you okay? I asked. I'm fine. The nurse said they did some damage to my lungs and throat, but it should heal up in a few days. All the perks of being a mythical creature. At least there is one, I said sarcastically. This coming from the girl who can fly and deflect a speeding bullet. You have nothing to complain about. Super girl. I chuckled, a smile coming to my lips for the first time in quite a while. The nurse said I could get up today. You know, as long as I have someone with me. It must be boring hanging around Connor all day. That guy is all work. No play. We could go for a run, or go into town, or you need dress, Cease. We'll have time to do all that when you're better. She looked down, sadness in her eyes. Will we? She looked out the window, staring at nothing. You should get some sleep, I advised. No. I'm fine, she mumbled, her eyes drooping. Back's Spidey, my faded mate. Lights flashed around me and the room spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. Beep. I pressed the medication button, sending sedatives through her veins. Really? I'm beep. She lay back onto the bed, her eyes fighting to stay open, but her heavy lids winning out. Fine. She slipped into blissful unconsciousness and I set the button down. I sat there, holding her hand as she slept. I listened to the calming beat of her heart, the only noise in the silence. Maggie. I jumped at Connor's voice. Yeah, I whispered. He looked at Cease and, realizing she was asleep, lowered his voice. Why don't you come to the kitchen? It's past lunch. You must be hungry. I nodded and got up slowly. Carve you to be as quiet as possible, and followed him silently to the kitchen. I sat at the counter as Connor made his cold-cut sandwiches. Ellie walked in and took Connor's sandwich from his hand, taking a bite out of it. Hey, she mumbled. Connor sighed. Ellie, can't you make your own sandwich? Now why would I do that when you can make it for me? She smiled and finished the sandwich off. So what's new at the top? Not much, he replied. I finished the monthly supplies and got the Jeep back from the garage. Dan Mechanics took a week to fix a simple problem with the brakes. He handed me my sandwich and I mumbled a thanks. Danny hasn't made any recent moves, but he's no doubt planning an attack as we speak. Any movement on this trade or business? I piped in. No, unfortunately, I have no clue who it is. Though whoever he is, he must be someone at least close to someone in high ranks or he would know the exact details of everything. But beyond that, no movement. Connor. A boy ran into the kitchen, panic on his face. What's wrong, Lucas? Connor grasped the boy's shoulder to keep him from falling over. The boy bent double with his hands on his knees, breathing as if he had run a marathon. The boy stared at Connor, at loss for words, his eyes filled with pity and fear. His worried face made him look much older than the 15 he no doubt was. I'm so sorry. Alpha. He looked down and handed Connor a newspaper. Connor looked at the paper, his eyes traveling back and forth across the ink, growing wider in terror as he read further. Where did you get this? He asked the boy, his breath shallow and panic-stricken. The boy didn't answer, he merely stood there, petrified under Connor's glare. I said, where did you get this? Connor shoved the paper into the boy's chest, his eyes in panic and his teeth clenched. It was I in the newspaper rack at the gas station. Sir. No. Shut up. It's wrong. He stormed out of the kitchen, pulling a cell phone out of his pocket and dialing furiously. I grabbed the newspaper from the counter. On the front page there were pictures of 10 women, all headshots, as if they were school photos. Only the women were at least in their 30s. Their smiling faces were in contrast to the gruesome headline, mass killing, 10 women dead. The mauled bodies of 10 women were found last night at the home of Elizabeth Sinclair. According to Patricia Lewis, who discovered the bodies shortly before 5 p.m., she had been invited to a party at the Sinclair home last night. According to the M.E.'s preliminary report, injuries to the body appear to be inflicted by animal teeth and claws similar to a dog attack, but the police have not ruled out foul play. Pending full investigation, authorities are advising residents to exercise caution by locking doors and staying inside as much as possible. Any unusual behavior should be reported to your local police department. Next of kin are being notified. Authorities are trying to locate Connor Sinclair, son and only living relative to Elizabeth Sinclair. Anyone with information on his location, or any other information pertaining to this case, please call the anonymous tip line at 5,416,181,847. Morana 4. I ran straight upstairs to the library where I knew he would be. The room was a mess. Books were scattered across the floor and chairs were thrown across the room, lying broken at the foot of the walls. He was hunched over at his desk, his head in his hand. I called her house. He mumbled. There was a silence, deadly and suppressing. He looked over at me, his eyes red and swollen. His hair lay disheveled from a nervous hand brushing Bowitt. The police answered. A pang of empathy racked through me. He killed her Maggie. Who Danny, of course. He stood so quickly his chair flew across the floor. His hands curled into fists as he spoke. That wasn't a party. It was a pack meeting. They were mauled by dogs, Maggie. Put the pieces together. That bastard killed his own mother. With one swing, he sent the desk shattering against the wall. This is the last straw. He's gone too far this time. Connor. He ignored me, stalking out of the room and heading down the stairs. I followed, his deathly silence keeping me quiet. We came to the courtyard and he shifted, leaping onto the picnic table. His howl was sorrowful and pain, the howl of loss. The pack gathered and he shifted back. He stood atop the picnic table, staring over the assembling crowd, tensed and angry. I noticed Cease out of the corner of my eye, hobbling out of the front door on crutches, the nurse at her side. This meeting was important. Everyone could tell. By the look on Connor's face, the pitch of his voice, or the foul scent of death in the air, they could tell. Everyone, he began. I have received some disturbing news. Denny mounted an attack on a pack meeting last night. He killed 10 of our alpha females. There were gasps among the crowd, some breathing wails that turned into weeps and tears. I'm launching a counterattack, one that will decide the outcome of this war. It has gone on far too long. Too many have died for my patience. I will gather our forces and destroy Annie and his pack, or die trying. I will pull in as many reinforcements as I can, but I'm sure he will do the same. We will most likely be outnumbered, but I believe we can win. I won't force anyone to fight, and I'm not going to lie to you. It will be dangerous. If anyone wants to back out, no one will think any less of you. But speak now. Who will join me? The crowd was silent, a look of foreboding on their faces. But what about James? Someone called out. How are we supposed to be him? Arguments of worry and concern broke out. They were all talking at once, turning into one frightened mob. Nevertheless, the consensus was clear. James was undefeatable. I knew what I had to do. I jumped onto the table and stood beside Connor, spreading my wings for show. They spanned the entire table and beyond, creating a black and white set behind us. The black markings were swirled in their hypnotizing design, but still the mob raged on. I beat them once, causing a wave of air to pass over the crowd, silencing them. They stared at me, awe-stricken and silent. I will fight, I declared. I am just as powerful as James, and I have one thing he doesn't have. A pack that is loyal to their alpha because they believe he is right. Not because of fear. They may outnumber us, but they fight without reason, without passion, simply because they are forced into soldierhood. We fight because we choose to. We have passion. We have reason. And that is more powerful than numbers. With Connor at the lead, we will win this war. Who is with me? The crowd rose in an uproar, cheering and clapping. Startled birds flew from the trees around us, creating a cloud of black in the sky. The cheering and yelling continued and broke into a chant. I will fight. I will fight. They chanted, we will win. Werewolf Forest, Chapter 26. The house was quiet and ominous, or fell heavy about it, the foreboding of the coming battle silencing even the forest creatures. The glory of the meeting was over. The strength of the court, all but words in the wind, and the mortality of the event was sinking deep into the hearts of the pack. Fear polluted the air, thick and putrid. We knew our chances, they were not in our favor. But still we would fight. There were only 2 people who said they would let a young man and his pregnant mate. The man said he had to protect her and his unborn child, so they were to leave that morning. Connor understood, and even commended him for putting his family first. The man was torn. He wanted to protect the pack, but he cowed and abandoned his mate, and she was in no condition to fight. Connor was driving them to the airport that morning. He stood in front of the large ornate mirror in the library, combing his hair back. He was wearing good pants and a collared shirt, vastly different from the cut, offs and ratty t-shirt uniform of the pack. He was meeting with the police after he dropped the couple off to tell them as much as he knew. That, of course, was a lie. He knew exactly who killed his mother and those other women, but he didn't tell them. He was forced to say he didn't know anything and watch them scramble around following false leads and making innocent suspects' lives miserable. He hated the idea, but he had no choice. "You'll have to stay in the cell," he said as he straightened his collar. "I know. Good luck with the police." I patted him on the back, trying my best to reassure him. "Thank you. I just hate lying to them. I hate knowing that they'll never catch the real killer." He leaned on his desk, letting his head fall. "They may not, but we will. And when we catch him, we'll carry out justice in a way the police never could." He looked over at me, sadness in his eyes. "I don't think I can kill him." He looked in the mirror, staring at his reflection. He studied his face as if it was a stranger. His eyes bore into the reflection, staring it down like an opponent, trying to read its intentions. "Why not?" I asked. "H.E.S. my brother Maggie. I can't just kill him." "We don't have a choice." "Connor." He won't stop. He didn't reply, just stared at the mirror. "He killed your mother," he flinched. I placed my hand on his shoulder. "I know what that feels like, and I would give anything to get revenge. Maybe when I'm done here, I will." He turned to me. "Revenge isn't always the answer." A knock at the door caused me to jump. Ellie poked her head through the door. "Connor, are you ready?" "Marek Spidey, my fated mate." White slashed around me and my wounds spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. As it'll ever be. We followed Deli out of the library and down the stairs. The few people that were walking about the house gave Connor sympathetic nods, but never made eye contact for long. Connor simply jerked his head stiffly in acknowledgement. He never broke his blank countenance. Cease hobbled out of the infirmary, leaning on a walker for support. The nurse followed after her, telling her to lie down, but Cease ignored him as she came over to Connor. She gave him an odd kind of sympathetic look and put her hand on his shoulder. Neither of them said a word. They just nodded to each other before we continued walking, and she finally went with the annoying nurse. We came to the back of the house, where the couple waited in front of a large green Jeep. They had their few bags packed into the back of the Jeep and tied down with bungee cords. The man had his arms around the woman's shoulders, as silent tears flowed from her eyes. One hand rested on her distended stomach, rubbing it lovingly. He took one hand off her shoulder and placed it over hers, entwining their fingers. When the woman saw Connor, she ran to him, throwing her arms around him in an awkward embrace, her baby a barrier between them. "I'm sorry, Connor. I'm so sorry," she sobbed into his shoulder. "I'm so sorry for everything." "Don't apologize," he said, wiping a tear from her cheek. "You just take care of that baby. You'll be safe in Gray Harbor. The safe house we have there has great medical facilities for the baby, and Danny doesn't have any packs in the Bahamas." She nodded, trying to hold back the tears. "It is a boy. We're naming him Connor." She smiled then, a solemn smile, a knowing smile. He looked at her as if he was a proud father, bidding her farewell as he gave her away to her would-be husband. He was like a surrogate father to this pack and everyone in it, caring for them as if they were his own. "Thank you, Tabby." The man walked over to Connor with his hands in his pockets. His head hung in shame. "Be happy, Matt," Connor said as he placed his hand on the man's shoulders. "You have a wonderful mate and a baby on the way. Don't look so sad. And when this is over, if we win, you and your family will be welcomed back with open arms. And if we lose, you are to lay low. Convene with the surviving members of the pack and gather our resources. I have sent instructions to all ranking members. Follow their orders as if they were coming from me directly. Yes, Alpha." Matt shook Connor's hand and rejoined his mate, rubbing her shoulders reassuringly. Connor turned to Ellie and I. "He'll be back around 5. They'll call if I'm late." Maggie, like I said earlier, you'll have to stay in the cell. I'm sorry. I nodded. It's all right. I can survive a day. And I'm sure Davo is getting lonely down there. He turned then to Ellie and looked at her with glassed eyes. They stared at each other for a moment, a silent conversation in their minds. Ellie nodded to an unspoken order and turned away, placing her hand on my shoulder and turning me as well. As we walked back to the house, I heard the Jeep's engine turn over and the wheels grinding across the rough terrain. Ellie led me down to the basement. Davo was sleeping on the mattress, an empty metal tray next to him. Ellie opened the cell door, the metal clanging and scraping together. Davo still slept soundly as Ellie shut and locked the door. "Call me if you need anything," she said, handing me a small cell phone. I nodded and she left the basement. I sat on the other mattress that was pressed against Davos. He was laying on his stomach, his arms and legs splayed out over the ends of the mattress. His shirt was clutched in his hand and his bare back was covered in dirt from the mattress. His hair was tousled and greasy from days without showering. Despite his unpecked appearance, he looked peaceful, angel-like. His lips hung open slightly, revealing his off-white teeth. Before I knew it, my hand was reaching over, ready to brush my fingers along his face. I jumped back when moved suddenly. He groaned and turned on his side so his bare back was facing me. He sighed, relaxing his muscles again. "Maggie," he sighed. I froze for a moment before I realized he was still asleep, lost in his dreams. I could only hope they were good dreams. He needed all the light he could get, here in the dark. I woke up to the sound of someone clearing their throat. My eyes lazily fluttered open to see Connor leaning against the open cell door. His eyes drooped with fatigue, and his collar was undone. I tried to sit up, only to feel weight holding me down. I looked down to see the arm of a sleeping Davo draped across my waist. I felt blood rush to my cheeks as I carefully lifted his arm off me. I stood and walked to Connor. The smell of bourbon rolled off him. "Come on," he said as he closed the door and led me back up the stairs. When we came to the library, he fell into his chair and put his head into his hand. I stood in silence for a few minutes. "I take it didn't go well," I almost whispered. He laughed humorlessly. "Oh no," he said, a sarcastic smile on his lips. "It went great." He pulled a key out of his pocket and unlocked a drawer in his desk. He pulled out a whiskey bottle and a glass. He poured the brown liquid into the glass and took a sip. They believed every word I said. They're wasting countless man-hours as we speak. He downed the rest of the glass and slammed it down on the table. He lifted the bottle to pour another glass, but I put my hand on his and gently pushed it back down. Connor looked up at me with red-lined eyes. "She's gone, and it's his fault." They let me see her body. They said I shouldn't, but I insisted. She was all torn up as Sob rocked Connor's body and tears began to fall from his eyes. I put my hand on his shoulder, rubbing it reassuringly. How could he do that to his own mother? He sat through the tears. I wrapped my arms around him and let his head rest against my shoulder as he cried. We stayed like that until the late hours of the night. When he calmed down some, he told me stories about his mother. How, when he was younger, in the summers, she would take him to pick fresh berries and they would bake pies for the pack. How she would dress like a Hollywood star every day, but in the drop of a hat she would throw on hiking boots and go camping under the stars. How much he loved her. I sat and listened all night. I even offered my own stories of my mother. We laughed at jokes and funny stories, smiles on our faces from remembering the mothers we loved. But then the air turned serious. His smile faded. "I have to kill him, don't I?" He looked down at his hands. "You don't have to do anything." But I don't see another way around it. He bit his lip and nodded. I placed my hand on his shoulder. "It's just never going to stop. If you don't, it's the only way." I know. He stood and brushed out his jacket. Come on. It's late. Connor dropped me off at my room. Ellie wasn't in yet, but Connor said it should be fine. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling. I tossed and turned for hours, sometimes staring at the window, sometimes at the ceiling, and sometimes at Ella's empty bed. But eventually I fell into a restless sleep, dreams of the days to come haunting my thoughts. Werewolf Forest to Chapter 27. The sun was beating down on the front yard. The house was as quiet as it had been the day before. We were to leave in too. The crushing force of fear weighed down on everyone, getting heavier and heavier with every second that ticked slowly past. Connor and I were outside at the benches. He had been on the phone all day, calling in reinforcements. We did not speak of the night before, except for a heartfelt thank you this morning. Nothing else needed to be said. All right, I'll expect you soon, no ha bye. Connor flipped his phone closed and set it down. He picked up a stack of papers and started to rustle through them. Connor, if we aren't going to leave until the day after tomorrow, how do you know Danny won't just come here and attack us before we leave? Won't the traitor warn him? I asked. He looked over at me with a knowing smirk. Exactly. The traitor will warn him. In counting on it, I gave him a skeptical look. Seeing that I didn't understand, he began to explain. Danny is an exhibitionist if nothing else. He will want this final battle, this final standoff. He will want to stare us down, with his army at his flanks, and show that he doesn't need sneak attacks to defeat us. And tomorrow I will announce where exactly we will be headed. He will meet us there. He never has been able to turn down a challenge. Connor rolled his eyes and looked back to his papers. You want him to know we're coming, but we'll be outnumbered. The element of surprise could be our only tactic. He nodded and put the stack of papers neatly on the table. I know, but there was no way around it anyway, so I figured there was no point in hiding it. And think about it this way, when they are informed by the traitor, it will clear your and Davos' names. How do you figure that? You've been with me and Davo has been in the cell. There's no way either of you could have tipped them off. You see. His cell phone began to beep and vibrate against the table. Just a minute. He picked up his cell phone and flipped it open, placing it to his ear. Hello. Yeah, already. He turned around and looked at the tree line. All right, see you in a sec. He flipped the phone closed and looked at me with a smirk. Maggie, I have a surprise for you. Yo, Mags. I flipped around to see Kyle, the one and only leader of the Freedom Fighters, walking out of the tree line, followed by Donnie and Luke. I ran to them and wrapped my arms around Kyle. How you doing, kid? I'm all right. I can't believe you guys are actually here. I let go of Kyle and hugged Luke, then Donnie. So, how are you? Donald. I asked, a smirk on my face. And just fine, Margaret. He arched an eyebrow at me. I slapped the back of his head, making his signature baseball cap fall to the ground. Don't call me Margaret, I said, waving my finger at him. Then don't call me Donald, he retorted, poking me in the nose. I chuckled at the old annoyance. Then my smile faded. With my arms still wrapped around Donnie's neck, I leaned back so I could look at his face. I heard about Brennan, Jared, and Taylor. He looked down, yeah. I let go of Donnie and looked to each of them, their faces sullen. Wait, I began, my stomach sinking. Where's Carter? Kyle gave me a pointed look. Understanding. I nodded. They got him too. It was a question. Luke nodded. Hey, Kyle put his finger under my chin and lifted my face up. He went down fighting. He wouldn't want you to dwell on the bad things. We're all together again, so let's treat this like the reunion it is, not a funeral. You're right, I said, a sad smile on my lips. Come on inside. We can get something to eat. Connor followed us inside and into the kitchen. As we got lunch, we reminisced over old times. We told embarrassing stories about each other, made fun of all our mistakes and fumbles. We laughed at Donnie for taking almost a year to learn how to throw a knife correctly. We laughed at me for secretly following them when I was told not to go on a mission. All our old tales and memories were laid out like a movie of our past. All our fallen comrades were remembered as if they were sitting there with us. But something was missing. Andrew was nowhere to be seen. In all our reminiscing, we were one short. They knew something was wrong, but none of them voiced it. Call gave me a knowing look, but said nothing. He would probably find Andrew and ask him. But for that moment, I allowed myself to be lost in the memories, in the laughter. I made myself forget the empty feeling, no matter how allowing it was. It was late. Ellie was lying asleep in her bed, much like everyone else in the house. Reinforcements had been showing up all day. Tents were set up in the yard for them. I spent most of the day with Kyle, Luke, and Dottie, but for most of it, I wasn't all there. My mind was wandering through my past, leaving the present for the living. I looked to the window. The moon was almost full as it shone bright in the sky. The stars glittered the black sky behind it. It stared at me, calling to me. I opened the window and breathed in the crisp night air. I needed to go out. I needed some space. I scribbled down a note on a spare piece of paper for Ellie to find if she woke up to find me gone. The wind felt good against my wings. The air flew through the feathers, gently lifting me. I stretched out my arms, letting the cool air engulf me. The wind tousled my hair, which was beginning to grow out again. I looked up at the moon once more, flying higher and higher towards it. The air became thin and my lungs began to constrict. I closed my wings and let myself fall. I fell further and further, plummeting toward the ground. At the last moment, I snapped open my wings, my feet just barely brushing the tops for the trees. Then I just rode the wind, letting it take me where it would. I looked down, watching the trees pass under me. A small path twined through the trees, like a snake crawling in the grass. There was a small figure walking along the path. I swooped down to get a closer look. Andrew. I flew down to the path in front of him. He barely reacted to me, just stopped and looked at the ground. Andrew, I whispered, unable to say anything else. He looked up and we shared a glance for a moment. One single moment. His piercing gaze seemed tortured and hateful. He turned away, breaking the trance, and walked past me. I flew into the air again and landed in front of him, blocking his path. What do you want? He mumbled, his face still lowered. Andrew, why are you being like this? I asked, walking closer to him. You know damn well why. He seethed, his eyes narrowing to all but slits as they cut into me. The green of his eyes might as well have been as red as hot iron. I had never seen them like that. Don't. He interrupted me, putting his hand up for me to stop. Just don't. I sighed. Why did you retract, you vouch? He looked down and his shoulders sagged. His face changed from anger to shame. Look, you made your decision, and we'll both have to live with that. But he licked his lips. I need time. I can't be around you right now. I'm sorry, Margaret. He turned around and started heading back to the house. He didn't look back. Not once. My stomach sank. He called me Margaret. He never called me Margaret. Not since the day that we met. I started running in the opposite direction. The ground flew beneath my feet, and before I knew it, I was running on all fours. I sprinted through the forest, not caring about the thorns digging into my pelt. I just kept running. I came to a clearing. There was a small pond where the moon reflected like a pearl in the sky. I reached my nose up to it and howled. It echoed against the hills, reverberating throughout the forest. More howls answered me, serenading the glowing moon. Werewolf Forest, Chapter 28. We were to leave the next morning. Everyone was silent as usual, friends with arms around each other, lovers with hands entwined. I was sitting with Kyle in the yard, Connor just a short distance away at a picnic table. Kyle bumped his shoulder against mine. "I know something's wrong, Megs." By his look, I knew I held him on my way out of this. "He told you, didn't he? Andrew. I shook my head in irritation. Am I the only one that didn't know about that? Pretty much. Yeah, he said, nodding. Look, I know it's not really your thing, but you should give him a chance. I can't, KY. I just can't. I turned my head to the side, unable to look in his eyes. If you won't give him a chance for a relationship, at least let him be your friend. He put his hand under my jaw and turned my head to him. Hey, I know this is difficult for you, but Andrew has done nothing but love you. And you are treating him unfairly. I shoved his hand away and stood up. I'm sorry, Kyle. I just can't handle it. He made his decision and I made mine. And we both have to live with that. Out of the corner of my eye, saw Bailey disappear into the tree line. I have to go. I ran to Connor and whispered in his ear. I have to take care of something. It's important. Cover for me, please. He nodded and I ran off after Bailey. Once I broke the tree line, she was nowhere to be seen, but I knew where she was heading. I took my time, enjoying the walk through the woods, seeing as it might be my last. Come tomorrow. I heard the yit pain of the wolf pups through the bushes. I followed the noise to find the same rock cliff where I had first met Bailey. She was sitting on the ground with one pup's head in her lap, petting his back softly. The other two were wrestling in the dirt. They were bigger than when I had seen them last. Their fluffy fur had become coarser and it lay flatter against their skin. Bailey, I called. She looked up to me and smiled. The pups ran to me and jumped on me, tackling me to the ground. They attacked my face with their tongues as I tried to fight them off. I heard Bailey laughing from beyond the frenzy of fur and slobber. I guess they remember you, she said through fits of laughter. I finally escaped the pups as they began to fight amongst one another again. Yeah, I guess, I said as I brushed the dirt and leaves off of my cloths. Come on, she said, a playful smile on her face. I want to show you this awesome field I found. It's covered in wildflower and Bailey. I interrupted. I need to talk to you. Her smile faded and she nodded. She sat on the edge of the rock, her legs dangling. I sat beside her. Are you going to fight tomorrow? I asked. She took a deep breath before answering. Yes, I don't think I can fight James alone. He is too powerful. If I fight him alone, I will die. She flinched. I need you to fight with me. Against James. She bit her lip and looked to the side. I don't know and not that great of a fighter. You are one of the most powerful beings on the earth. I'm not going to lie to you, though. This will be dangerous. But I think together we can beat him. Please. I need your help. I put my hand on her shoulder. She looked unsure for a moment, but nodded. Yeah, I'll fight him with you. Thank you. I hugged her. She was stiff for a moment, but then hugged me back. We're going to get through this. Us in the pack. She laughed humorlessly. Thanks for the optimism, but our chances are slim. Being realistic, most of us are going to die. Come on. I want to show you that field just in case we are included in most. Flowers covered the field like small colored gems. They blew in the soft gusts of wind like swells of colored water. The pups ran through the flowers and rolled in them, making little craters in the sea. They got up speckled in flower petals and leaves. I knew I couldn't stay for long, but I never wanted to leave. There I could forget about the coming doom. I could forget about the hatred Andrew now held for me. I could just forget. Every bad thought was purged from my mind. The sweet aroma of the flowers filled my nose and mind. The sun beat down on the field, making the jewel flowers glow. Rose bushes lined the edges of the field. Small dead drips clung to the velveteen petals. I touched one of the roses, its red petals softly caressing my hand. I plucked the rose from its stem, the thorns just brushing my fingers. I stared at the flower resting in my hand. I studied its gentile curves and patterns. Its petals layered themselves in an unsolvable maze, winding and twisting around the center where the pure yellow light resided. The red maze protected the light, shielding it from the outside terrors. I brushed my thumb along the delicate curves of the petals. I curled my fingers around the flower, the petals pressing together and destroying the paths of the maze. The flower crinkled and cracked as small drops of red liquid bled from the ripped petals. I squeezed the flower in my fist, crushing it into the contours of my palm. Shimmering red nectar trickled down my arm and dripped to the ground. I opened my fist to see the destroyed flower. The yellow center was crushed, devoid of the light it once held. The petals were almost black, and my palm was stained with red. Connor led me to the basement. He wouldn't tell me what was going on. I followed him blindly down the stairs into the cell where Dava was bouncing a tennis ball against the wall. Connor unlocked the door and we both stepped in. "I need to speak with you both," he said, putting his hands in his pockets. "You've been treated unfairly, and on behalf of my pack I apologize. I know we don't deserve it, but we need your help. We need as many people we can get. I know it's asking a lot, but we're desperate. Maggie, I know your answer. But Davo, I know you have no ties to this pack. So either way," he pushed the door to the cell open. "You are free to go." Davo was silent for a moment as he stared at the door. "I'll fight," he said, looking back at Connor. He then turned to me, an odd look in his eyes. "Closest thing I have to a home at the moment." Connor put his hand on Davo's shoulder. "Thank you. You will be welcomed into the pack when this is all over. If there is a pack left to be welcomed into, that is." He chuckled and shook Davo's hand. "Come on. Let's go outside. I'm sure you are itching to get out of this basement." "I don't know. I've grown kind of fond of my own dank little room," Davo replied sarcastically. I'm sure Connor left and slapped Davo on the back. We walked out of the cell and Davo all but ran up the stairs. When Davo saw the door leading to the outside, he sprinted to it. "Davo, wait up," I yelled, running after him. He burst through the doors, raising his hands up in the air. He turned around to me and picked me up, twirling me in a circle. "God, it feels good to be out of there," he said, putting me down. He did a backflip, then flopped down on the grass, rolling in it like a small child. He laughed, a bright smile on his face and his eyes shut to the sun. "I need to run. I haven't shifted in forever." I feel like him about to explode. He opened one eye to look up at me. "Run with me." I looked back at Connor. "Go ahead," he said. "Just come back before dark." Davo jumped up and we ran to the tree line, pushing and shoving each other on the way. I jumped into the air and shifted, landing on all fours and taking off like a shot. I saw a flash of brown fur fly by me and into the forest. We raced and wrestled through the woods for hours, only returning when the sun was falling to the horizon. We returned to the house just as the sun reached its last glowing branches across the sky. I heard yelling coming from the courtyard. "What the hell? Connor. What are you thinking?" "Sasha." She was standing in front of Connor, her face red and her arms tense by her side. Connor seemed calm. His arms were crossed and he looked at Sasha as if she were a small child throwing a fit. People were staring at the two of them, but they kept their distance. The council already ruled Connor. Those traitors should have stayed in the cell. Her voice rang shrill around the silent yard. "Sasha, you are being ridiculous. I don't know what your problem is with them, but they have both agreed to fight." Connor's voice was low and cool, a contrast to Sasha. They'll probably just screw us over during the fight. They'll switch side at the last minute. That little bitch and her boy toy need to be locked up like the treacherous mutts they are. She stamped her foot into the ground. Connor turned his head, seeing us. Sasha followed his gaze. Her eyes narrowed to slits as she glared at us. There they are, she yelled, pointing at us. They're traitors. They'll get us all killed. Everyone started chattering amongst themselves. Soon they grew into a mob, yelling for our immediate capture. They were scared, terrified. Sasha's words of hate only fueled the fire. Gunnar, get them. Davo put his hand on my shoulder, pulling me back slightly, ready to run as the mob grew angrier and angrier. By the sounds of their shouts, they were ready to string us from the nearest tree. Enough. Connor's voice echoed throughout the clearing, silencing everyone with the slight growl. His voice toned with a force that would have made a lion cower. Everyone was bent slightly, as if bowing to his authority. I am Alpha, and this is my decision. They are free. That's final. Anyone who has a problem with that can keep it to themselves. Everyone was still cowering, as silent as timid mice. Connor looked down and brushed his hand over his face. Everyone get to bed. We leave early tomorrow. Everyone filed inside or into their tents silently, still under the power of Connor's orders. Sasha still stood in the yard, hands clenched at her sides. Connor whispered something in her ear following the rest of the pack inside. Sasha turned and met my eyes with a glare that cut through metal. Devo, go inside. I need to take care of something. I patted him on the back and started to walk toward Sasha. It was time to find out what the hell her problem was. Werewolf Forest, Chapter 29. We were the only two left in the yard. We stared each other down, glares piercing like bullets. She stalked toward me like an angry bull and my muscles tensed instinctively. She stood but 2 inches from my face, our noses almost touching. You broke the rules. The words hissed from her mouth like a snake warding off a predator. You need to have Connor with you at all times. He gave us permission, I said calmly, crossing my arms over my chest. I kept my face blank, my eyes as barren as the Sahara. Her eyes were glowing with red, hot anger. Don't think you're above the rules. You little bitch. Just because you're some kind of super creature doesn't mean that you're better than me. She took another step forward, putting us toe to toe. I tried to control my anger, but I could feel the wolf in me roaring to get out. I felt the need to slash my claws across her face, tearing flesh from bone. My wolf rammed against its cage, angry, desperate. What is your problem? I growled, breaking my bacon expression. Why do you have it out for me? Why did you throw me in that cell? What the hell did I ever do to you? You stole my father. Silence took the yard. She was breathing heavily, a murderous glare in her eyes. I was at a loss to respond. What are you talking about? I breathed, taking a step back. She chuckled, sorrowful and empty. They never told you. Told me what? My chest felt as if something was pressing hard against it. My mind searched for any possible explanation for her accusation, but it found none. Andrew used to talk about you. All the time. She laughed at this. It was just annoying at first. But then he told me your parents' names, and I made the connection. Imagine my surprise when you showed up here. What the hell are you going on about? Sasha. I stared at her, confused. You see, 18 years ago, your father had an affair with my mother. Time seemed to stop in that moment. When she got pregnant, he promised to leave his wife for her. He was going to marry her and help raise me. But then your little whore mother tricked him somehow and got pregnant too. He said that he couldn't leave her. He said it was a mistake and that he loved his wife. A mistake. My mother was not a mistake. My mom had me all alone, and then she started drinking. Every night I had to clean up her vomit and drag her into her bed. It was because of you. It's your fault my childhood was drowned in beer bottles. Andrew used to talk about you. How great you were, how nice you were. It was you, damn it. The shock overwhelmed me as I took it all in. You don't know what you're talking about. I said slowly. Odantai. You had the perfect little life, didn't you? You were Daddy's little girl. I felt my hands clench into fists at my side. You don't know what he was like. Oh, let me guess, he never let you do what you wanted. He was so lame. He wouldn't let you stay out until 1 in the morning. He wouldn't let you go to parties. She teased. My jaw clenched and it took all my will to keep from slamming her against the wall of the house. No, actually. When I was 5, I was Daddy's little girl. But only because I didn't know him. One night I heard screaming downstairs. I ran down only to find my mother on the ground. She was covered in blood and my father was standing over her with a broken bottle in his hand. I ran upstairs and from that night on, he didn't even bother to hide what he was for me. He would beat my mother right in front of me. And when then the drunken bastard caused the car crash that killed my mother, he switched to me. See this? I lifted up my shirt and pointed to the jagged white scar on my side. That was my 13th birthday present. Signed, Daddy Dearest. You don't want my life. You don't want my father. I'm sorry for what he did to you and your mom, but your life wouldn't have been a hell of a lot better if he was there. Trust me, all our secrets were laid out to bear in the silence. The quiet was almost chilling. A soft wind blew by my ear, tossing my hair in front of my face. It whispered our secrets, reiterating them to torture our thoughts. I cringed as it blew cold on my shoulder. Then I looked back to her. Her hair blew back away from her face. Her eyes were wide with shock. Your eerie lion. My mom told me about him. He would have been a great father to me. She was desperately trying to rationalize what was hearing no. I said with a death-like calmness. He would have done the same thing to you. The night I was captured, I was running away from him with bus trips because he came home drunk again. No, your whore mother probably drove him to that. In a wisp of air, I had her against the house, my arm at her throat. Call my mother whore again, and I won't hesitate to break your neck. Her face was a mask of fear, and a single tear trailed down her face. I let her down slowly. What I said was the truth. You can go ahead and keep blaming me for your problems, but you'll just be lying to yourself. She put her hand over her mouth and started to sob. She turned and ran into the house, brushing shoulders with Connor as he walked out of the doors. Sasha was my sister. It didn't surprise me in the least that my father had an affair. I never expected a bastard like him to be faithful. But a sister, are you okay? I hadn't even realized he put his hand on my shoulder. I shook my head, trying to make a coherent thought. I need some time. They'll be back in 2 hours. Without waiting for a response, I extended my wings and shot into the heated sky. The moon was high in the sky when I returned. I landed silently on the deck outside of the library. You're late. Connor's voice made me jump. I hadn't noticed him leaning on the railing, a cigarette between his fingers. The smoke trailed from the end and swirled into the night sky. It twisted around the full moon, fogging its brilliance. Those things will kill you, you know. I said, walking up behind him. I leaned my elbows on the railing, looking out over the trees. Yeah, he chuckled. A dry, humorless noise. Smoke swirled out from his nostrils and between his teeth. I have just been worried. I was out to pick up some supplies and saw them behind the counter. I just couldn't resist, you know. I quit a few years ago, but I still have 1 or 2 when things get distressful. So this fight has you stressed enough that you decided to poison your lungs with cancer smoke. This whole fight was a bad idea. He pressed the cigarette but against the metal railing and flicked it over the edge. I'm leading my cut to their death snow. You're not. Cutter. Well, win. Trust me. He laughed and rolled his eyes. Look, I appreciate the optimism, but you're the only one that thinks that. Everyone here is preparing to die. Our biggest threat is James. And I can take him out. I hopped up onto the railing, dangling my feet over the floor and fluttering my wings in the cool night air. After that, it will be a piece of cake. No offense, Maggie, but I've seen this guy in action. I know how hard you've worked, and I'll bet I'm just not so sure. He turned his head to the side, pulling a box of cigarettes out of his pocket. Connor, he looked up at me. I can do this. He took a cigarette out of the box and put it in his mouth. He slid his thumb against the end of a lighter, clicking the flame to life. He put his hand over the lighter, shielding the little flame from the wind. The fire licked at the end of the cigarette, making it glow red. He took a long draw from it and sighed the breath out between his lips. All right, he said, nodding. If you say you can handle it, I'm going to have to trust you on that. Just try not to get killed, okay? It was hard enough dealing with Andrew when he thought he wouldn't see you until all this was over. They'd rather not have to deal with him if you die. He took another draw of the cigarette, making little rings of smoke float out of his mouth. What do you mean? I asked. Well, when he first came here, we immediately became friends. That's how he moved up so quickly. And I remember all he could ever think about for the first 3 months was you, how you were doing, and if you hated him for disappearing like that. And after that it was still the same, he was just better at controlling his thoughts. He took the cigarette out of his mouth and twirled it between his fingers. Oh, I folded my hands together in my lap and looked down at them. That guy is seriously in love with you, Maggie. He'd take a bullet for you. Trust me, I know. Sometimes he has trouble keeping his thoughts to himself. He tapped his temple. She's willing to do anything to make you happy. Whether it's a rose on Valentine's Day or, most recently, letting you be with Davao. If that's what you really wanted. Is that what you really want? No. I mean, I like Davao, but she's just a friend. I don't think he would ever be more. He snuffed out the cigarette on the railing. Do you love Andrew? No, well, yes, damn it, I don't know. I jumped off the railing and walked away slightly, my back to Connor. It's a simple question, Maggie. I could feel Connor standing behind me. It's just, I've been his friend since we were in preschool, and he says HES loved me since kindergarten. It's just a little hard to process, and I just don't know. I'm so confused. Well, let me ask you this. Do you care about him? Yes. Do you want him to be happy? Yes. Do you feel different when you're around him now? I thought of the odd feelings in the pit of my stomach when I saw his face, of the reaching heartbeat, of the aches in my chest when he turned away. Yes. Does thinking of him make you smile for seemingly no reason? Yeah, when I thought of all the happy memories, I couldn't help but smile. Would you do anything for him? I nodded. Anything. Now I'm going to ask you one more time. He turned me around and put both his hands on my shoulders. Do you love Andrew? And for the first time I realized it. I loved Andrew, yes. He leaned down to my height so his face was close to mine. Then what are you still doing here? I looked down at the floor and let mine take it in. Thanks, Connor. I smiled at him. He smiled back. No problem. Now get out of here. He patted me on the back. And tell Andrew he owes me. He called to me as I walked away toward Andrew's room. I could hear him laughing as I shut the library door behind me. The door ahead of me seemed larger than life. It stood before me, towering, hovering, and looking over me with a malicious wooden snarl. It growled as I tried to grab the handle. My heart was beating faster by the second, and before I could change my mind and walk away, I turned the knob and entered the room. He stood with his back to me. He was folding cloths and putting them in a travel bag. For the fight, I remembered. That foreboding future reminded me again of what I was doing, the ludicrous reality of the moment. He turned his head to me slowly, as if he had been expecting a visitor. But I doubt people coming into your room was anything odd in the pack. When he saw me, his face went slightly pale, as if he just became sick. The look in his eyes was one of hurt so deep it cut like a swallowed razor blade through his heart. "Bad Spidey, my fated mate. White splashed around me and my wings spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing." He grumbled quietly. "What do you want? I told you I couldn't see you for a while." I wanted to talk to you." He turned slowly and crossed his arms on his chest. "Then talk." His face stared blankly at me, as if I wasn't even there. I felt my chest clench. It's just you see." The incoherent steam of words was spewing like lava, burning my tongue as what I wanted to tell him fought to get out behind all the garble. The words wouldn't come, and before I knew it, I grabbed his face and smashed my lips to his. He froze at first, but quickly responded and gripped his hands on my hips, pulling me closer to him. The kiss was desperate, but gentile. He slowly slid his hands behind my back, hugging me to him in a warm embrace. We broke for air and I looked up at his confused but elated eyes. My voice came in but a whisper. "I think that about sums it up." He smiled and kissed me lightly on the lips. "I'm sorry it took me so long to figure out, Andrew. I love you. I'm so sorry." She closed his eyes and laid his forehead against mine. "Don't. All that matters is you're here now." One lone tear trailed down his face. It shone like a diamond as it left a shimmering trail on his cheek. "I love you, Mags." "I love you too, Andrew." I stroked one hand down his face. A smile formed on his lips. "You don't know how great it is to hear you say that." He pressed his lips to mine again, my face cradled between his hands. He slid his hands down my neck, over my shoulders, and down my sides. They rested on my hips, and his fingers slowly started to grip my butt. Something in me snapped at that moment. I'm not sure if it was out of fear of the coming battle, desperation from my newfound revelation, or simply raw instinct, but I roughly pressed myself to him, kissing faster and deeper. He pulled me up and I jumped onto him, wrapping my legs around his hips. He stumbled over to the bed and fell on it, taking me with him. He kept his weight on his elbows, trying to keep from crushing me. He slid his hand under my shirt and pulled it up a little. I broke this kiss for a moment and pulled my shirt over my head, tossing it across the room. He did the same with his. I raked my hands up and down his sculpted chest as he laid back down on top of me. He kissed me again. His tongue searched around my mouth, wrestling with my own. I took one of his hands and slid it down my own stomach, letting it come to rest at the button of my jeans. He pulled back and looked unsurely at me. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. We both knew where this was going. Though we did not speak it, the lust burning in his clear emerald eyes was surely the mirror of mine. I grabbed his face in between my hands and held it so he would look into my eyes, yes. I whispered as I drew circles on his cheek with my thumb. "I want you, Andrew. Forever. I love you." His eyes seemed to glow as I muttered those 3 simple words. "I love you too." He all but mouthed as he lowered his face to claim my lips as forever his. Can anyone else say fucking finally? So anyway, share your thoughts. I want to know Team Davos' opinion as well as Team Andrew's. And what about Sasha's secret, huh? Anyone see that coming? Let me know in the comments. Thank you all for joining me in the wild world of Wild Werewolf. I hope you had an amazing time. Don't forget to subscribe, leave your comments and likes, and come back for more wild adventures. See you next time.